The research vessel New Horizon drifted silently through the empty space between stars. Captain Woojin stood on the bridge and stared at the massive object floating ahead of them. It looked like no ship he had ever seen before. The alien vessel was dark and twisted. Its hull seemed to be made of metal and something that looked almost alive. Strange growths covered its surface like barnacles on an old boat, but these growths pulsed with a faint green light that made everyone on the bridge feel uneasy. "Long has it been out here?" asked Dr. Hayoung as she joined the captain. She was the head of the science team and had studied alien life forms for over 10 years. But she had never seen anything like this ship before. "Our computers say at least 500 years, Woojin replied. "Maybe longer." "The metal is old and worn, but something inside is still powered up. You can see energy readings coming from the center of the ship." Hyan looked at the readings on her tablet. The energy was unlike anything in their databases. It was not nuclear power or fusion energy. It was something completely different, something that seemed to respond to their presence. "Captain, I am picking up movement inside the ship," said Lieutenant Minho from his station. "Whatever is in their nose, we are here." The bridge fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the ship's engines. Everyone watched the alien vessel on the main screen. The green lights on its hull were pulsing faster now. It almost looked like a heartbeat. "We need to board that ship," Hayoung said quietly. "This could be the discovery of a lifetime. We might finally meet a living alien species." Captain Woojin was not so sure. He had been in space for 20 years and had learned to trust his instincts. Something about this ship felt wrong. It felt dangerous. "Doctor, what if whatever's inside does not want visitors?" he asked. "Then we will be careful," Hayoung replied. "But we have to try. Humanity has been searching for other intelligent life for centuries. We cannot turn away now." 2 hours later, a small boarding party prepared to enter the alien ship. Hayoung wore her environmental suit and checked her equipment one final time. She carried a translator device, bioscanners, and sample containers. Most importantly, she carried hope. "Remember the protocol," Captain Woojin said over the radio. "Stay together. Do not touch anything unless Dr. Hayoung says it is safe. If something goes wrong, get back to the shuttle immediately." The boarding party included Hayoung, 2 security officers, and Engineer Biora. They flew across the empty space in a small shuttle and docked with the alien ship. The airlock was different from human designs, but they managed to open it. Inside the ship, emergency lights cast strange shadows on the walls. The air was breathable, but smelled like metal and something sweet that none of them could identify. The corridors were wide and tall, built for beings much larger than humans. "The gravity is close to Earth normal," Biora reported. "The ship is maintaining life support even after all these years. The technology here is incredible." They moved deeper into the ship following the energy readings. The walls were covered with symbols that looked like writing but were too complex for their translation software. Some of the symbols seemed to move when they were not looking directly at them. "Do you feel that?" asked Security Officer Taeyin. "It feels like something is watching us." Hayoung felt it too. There was a presence somewhere in the ship, something intelligent and aware, something that was studying them just as they were studying the ship. They found the source of the energy. Readings in what appeared to be the ship's central chamber. The room was enormous with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness. In the center of the room was a structure that looked part machine and part living creature. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Metallic tubes and organic tissues were woven together in complex patterns. Lights flowed through the structure like blood through veins. At the center of it all was something that could only be described as alive. The creature was roughly humanoid but much larger than any human. Its body was a mixture of flesh and metal that shifted and changed as they watched. It had no visible eyes, but Hayoung felt certain it was looking at her. "Everyone stay calm," she whispered into her radio. "I think it is just as curious about us as we are about it." She took a step forward. The creature did not move. She took another step. Still no movement. But when Security Officer Dong Wook tried to follow her, the creature suddenly came alive. It moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. Metallic tentacles shot out from its body and grabbed Dong Wook before he could react. The security officer screamed as he was lifted into the air. Get back! Taehyun shouted as he raised his weapon. But before he could fire, more tentacles wrapped around him. Creature held both men in the air as they struggled helplessly. Stop, Hayoung called out. Please do not hurt them. The creature turned its attention to her. She could feel its intelligence pressing against her mind like a gentle touch. It was trying to communicate with her, but not with the others. Slowly, the creature lowered the two security officers to the ground and released them. It scrambled backward to the entrance of the chamber.
Yes.
But it kept its attention focused on Hayoung. Doctor, we need to leave now, Taehyun said as he helped Dongwook to his feet. But Hayoung did not move. She felt drawn to the creature in a way she could not explain. There was something familiar about its presence, something that felt almost like recognition. It does not want to hurt me, she said softly. I think it wants to talk. The creature extended one of its appendages toward her. Not a tentacle like the ones that had grabbed the security officers, but something more delicate, more gentle. Hayoung reached out and touched it. The moment their skin made contact, images flooded her mind. She saw stars dying and worlds burning. She saw creatures like this one fighting against something dark and terrible. She saw the end of an entire civilization, and she saw herself. Somehow this ancient being had been waiting for her. When the vision ended, Hayoung found herself on her knees, breathing heavily. The creature had withdrawn its appendage, but she could still feel its presence in her mind. What happened? Biora asked as she helped Hayoung stand up. I think Hayoung said slowly, we just made first contact. And I think this creature has been waiting a very long time to meet us. The creature watched them as they left the chamber. But Hayoung could feel its attention focused entirely on her. Whatever this being was, it had chosen her for something important, something that would change everything. 3 days later, Research Station Kepler-7 buzzed with activity. The creature from the alien ship now lived in the station's most secure containment facility. Thick metal walls and energy barriers separated it from the rest of the station. None of the barriers seemed to matter much to the being inside. Dr. Hayoung sat in the observation room watching the creature.
Oh.
Through reinforced glass. It had changed since they brought it aboard. Its body was more solid now, less fluid. The metallic parts of its form had taken on a darker color, almost black. But the organic portions still pulsed with that strange green light. Progress. With communication? Asked Dr. Minho as he joined her at the observation window. He was the station's expert on alien psychology, though he admitted this creature was beyond anything he had studied before. Some Hayoung replied without taking her eyes off the being. It responds to me but ignores everyone else. Yesterday, it tried to break through the containment field when you got too close to my lab. The creature seemed to sense their conversation. It turned toward the observation window, and Hayoung felt that familiar touch against her mind. Not painful, but insistent, like someone gently knocking on a door. There it goes again, said Chief Engineer Biora from her monitoring station. Energy levels are spiking. Whatever it is doing is drawing power from somewhere we cannot detect. Biora had been studying the creature's energy patterns for 3 days. The readings made no sense according to human science, as the being seemed to generate power from nothing and could manipulate energy in ways that should have been impossible. Show me the overnight recordings, Hayoung said. Biora activated the playback system. The screen showed the containment chamber at night when the station was quiet. The creature stood perfectly still for hours, but its body continued to pulse. With light, then around midnight something changed. The creature began to move in slow, careful patterns. Its appendages traced symbols in the air that glowed briefly before fading away. The movements were deliberate and complex, like a dance or a ritual. It has been doing this every night, Biora explained. Always the same pattern. Always starting at exactly midnight station time. Hayoung watched the recording with growing fascination. It is not random movement. Those symbols mean something. It is trying to tell us something. We're trying to cast some kind of alien spell, muttered Security Chief Dongwook from behind them. He had not been the same since the creature grabbed him on the alien ship. That thing killed 17 people across 3 different ships before we brought it here. We should have left it in space. Commander Tehan entered the observation room carrying a datapad filled with reports. His expression was grim. Have another problem. Creature's presence is affecting other systems on the station. Computer networks are experiencing strange glitches. Some crew members are reporting unusual dreams. Hai Young turned to face him. What kind of dreams? Dark. Visions. Images of dying stars and empty worlds. The medical staff thinks it might be some form of psychic radiation the creature is emitting. It is not radiation, Hai Young said firmly. It is trying to communicate. The visions are memories. I've been receiving them too, but mine are clearer, because I can connect with it directly. Taehyun looked concerned. Doctor, you have been spending too much time with that creature. Perhaps you should take a break from the research. I cannot stop now, Hai Young replied. I am the only one who can understand what it is trying to tell us. I think what it wants to say is very important. She stood up and walked toward the containment chamber entrance. The others followed nervously. Hai Young had been visiting the creature directly every day, much to everyone's concern. But it was the only way to make real progress. Usual safety. Protocols apply, Commander Tehan announced. If the creature shows any signs of aggression, Dr. Hai Young retreats immediately. Hai Young entered the containment area through a series of airlocks. The creature waited for her in the center of the chamber. As she approached, it extended one of its more delicate appendages toward her. She no longer hesitated to make contact. The moment they touched, images flooded her mind. But these visions were different from the first contact. Were more organized, more deliberate. Creature was learning how to communicate with her human brain. She saw a galaxy filled with life. Thousands of worlds where different species lived and thrived. Beautiful cities that reached toward the stars. Art and music and literature created by minds unlike anything that Earth had ever produced. Then she saw the darkness coming. It started at the edge of the galaxy like a spreading stain. Wherever it touched, life simply stopped. Not destroyed or consumed, but drained away until nothing remained but empty husks. Entire star systems went dark as the darkness spread inward. The creature showed her its own people. They were tall and graceful beings who had mastered the balance between technology and biology. Their cities were living things that grew rather than being built. Their ships were partners, not just machines. But even they could not stop the darkness. Hai Young saw the final battle. Millions of the creatures, people fighting desperately against an enemy that seemed to have no physical form. The darkness flowed around their weapons and through their defenses, consumed their life force and left behind only silence. This creature, the one now holding her hand so gently, was the last of its kind. It had survived by hiding in the deep spaces between stars.
Waiting.
And watching for 500 years. The vision ended and Hai Young found herself back in the containment chamber. The creature was studying her face with what she could only interpret as hope. You survived because you were looking for something, she said aloud. You were looking for someone who could understand, someone who could help you fight back. Creature's body pulsed brighter. Through their connection, Hai Young felt something like agreement. But there was more. The creature was trying to show her something else. New images came, but these were harder to understand. She saw Earth from space, but wrong somehow. The colors were different. The lights from the cities flickered strangely, moving through space around the planet were dark shapes that her eyes could not quite focus on. The darkness, she whispered. It is coming here too. The creature's grip on her hand tightened slightly. It's not enough to hurt, but enough to convey urgency.
Through
their mental link, she felt its desperate need to warn her, to protect her, to prepare for something terrible that was already on its way. Outside the containment chamber, alarms began to sound. The long-range sensors had detected something approaching the outer system, something that absorbed light instead of reflecting it, something that matched the energy signatures from the creature's memories. Hai Young looked into what she thought might be the creature's eyes and felt a chill run through her entire body. How long do we have? She asked. The answer came not in words, but in feelings. Fear, urgency, and underneath it all, a fierce determination to protect the one person who could finally understand. Not long at all. The emergency meeting in the station's command center felt tense. Research Director Yansu sat at the head of the table with reports scattered before her. The data from the long-range sensors painted a frightening picture. 3 outer colonies have gone silent in the past 12 hours, she announced to the gathered officers and scientists. No distress signals, no final transmissions. They simply stopped responding to all communication attempts. Dr. Ha-Yon entered the meeting room still wearing her lab clothes. She had spent the entire night working with the creature to understand more about the approaching threat. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, but her mind was sharp with urgency. The creature has a name, she said without waiting for permission to speak. It calls itself Kethmer. In its language, that means last watcher. I do not care what it calls itself, Director Yansu replied coldly. What I care about is whether this thing brought the danger to us. Maybe the colonies are dying because we brought that creature here. Ha-Young shook her head firmly. Kethmer has been hiding from this enemy for 500 years. Now the danger was already coming. It found us on its own. She activated the wall display and showed images from her latest communication session with Kethmer. The pictures were disturbing. Entire worlds covered in a gray substance that looked like ash. Cities where buildings stood empty and perfect, but completely lifeless. Kethmer calls the enemy the Silence, she continued. It is not a single creature or even a species. It is something like a living idea that spreads from mind to mind. When it takes over a person, they become part of it. They lose everything that makes them individual. Commander Tae-Hyen leaned forward in his chair. How does it spread? Can we protect ourselves? It moves through neural networks. Any species with advanced brain development can be infected. But there are some minds it cannot touch. Ha-Young paused and looked around the room. Kethmer says I am one of them, that my neural structure is somehow immune to the Silence. Dr. Minho studied the images on the screen. What happened to Kethmer's people? How did an entire advanced civilization fall to this thing? Ha-Young closed her eyes and recalled the painful memories Kethmer had shared with her. They fought for thousands of years. Kethmer's species were guardians, who protected other worlds from cosmic threats. But the Silence was different from anything they had faced before. It did not destroy planets or kill people directly. It simply took away their will to exist as individuals. The room fell silent as everyone tried to process this information. The idea of losing one's individual identity was more terrifying than simple death. Show them the rest, said Chief Engineer Biora quietly. She had been monitoring Ha-Young's sessions with Kethmer and had seen the complete scope of the threat. Ha-Young activated another series of images. These showed the Silence in action. Dark shapes that moved between stars like living shadows. When they reached a populated world, the people would simply stop what they were doing and stand still. Not dead, but not truly alive either. The infected become part of a collective consciousness, Ha-Young explained. They retain their memories and skills, but lose all personal desires and individual thoughts. They become perfect servants of the Silence, helping it spread to new worlds. Security Chief Dongwook shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Can they be saved? Can we cure someone who has been infected? Kethmer does not know. Its people never found a cure. They could only fight to prevent the spread. Ha-Young's voice grew quieter. In the end, they were overwhelmed. Kethmer escaped in its ship and has been running ever since. Director Yansu stood up abruptly. This is exactly why I wanted that creature destroyed. It has brought a galactic plague to our doorstep. We should eliminate it before this gets worse. You cannot, Ha-Young said firmly. Kethmer is our only hope of fighting the Silence. Its people studied this enemy for millennia. It knows their weaknesses. What weaknesses? Asked Commander Tae-Hun. Ha-Young activated the final set of images. These showed Kethmer's people. In their final battle, some of them were fighting alongside creatures from other species. The Alliance looked desperate but determined. The Silence fears unpredictability, she explained. It can easily control minds that think in logical patterns. but it struggles with thoughts that are chaotic or emotional. That is why some individuals, like me, are naturally immune. Dr. Minho nodded slowly. Humans are notoriously unpredictable. Our emotions often override our logic. That could be an advantage. More than that, Hayoung continued, Kethmer believes that human creativity and adaptability might be the key to finally defeating the silence, but we need to work together. Kethmer has the knowledge, and I have the immunity. Together we might be able to find a way to stop this thing. Director Yansu looked skeptical, and if you were wrong, this creature is just using you to spread the infection further? Before Hayoung could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Lieutenant Minho rushed to the communications console and activated the incoming message system. The main screen showed Captain Jinwoo of the Defense Patrol ship, Guardian. His face was pale, and his voice shook as he spoke. Kepler 7, this is Guardian requesting immediate assistance. We have encountered survivors from Colony 7, but something is wrong with them. They are not responding to our questions. They just stand there and stare at us. The screen switched to show the Guardian's cargo bay. Dozens of colonists stood in perfect rows, their faces blank and expressionless. They did not move or speak. They simply existed. Dear God, whispered Commander Taehyun, it has already begun. Hayoung felt Kethmer's presence pressing against her mind from the containment chamber below. Through their connection, she sensed the creature's growing agitation. It recognized what they were seeing on the screen. Director, she said urgently, you have to let me work with Kethmer. Those people on the Guardian are already infected. If we do not act soon, the silence will spread to every ship and station in this system. Director Hyunsu stared at the screen showing the infected colonists. After a long moment, she nodded grimly. Act. Do whatever you have to do, Doctor. But if that creature betrays us, the responsibility will be yours. Hayoung was already heading for the door. She could feel Kethmer calling to her, its ancient mind filled with memories of battles, fought and lost. But this time would be different. This time they would not face the silence alone. The infected colonists from the Guardian arrived at Kepler 7 station in complete silence. They walked in perfect formation through the docking bay, their movements synchronized like dancers following the same rhythm. But their eyes were empty. Of all human expression, Dr. Hayoung watched from the observation deck as Security Chief Dong-wook tried to communicate with them. He asked simple questions about their names and where they came from. The colonists did not respond. They simply stood and waited for something that only they could sense. Kethmer was right, Hayoung said to herself. They are not dead, but they are not alive either. In the containment chamber far below, Kethmer had become increasingly agitated. Its body pulsed with darker colors, and its appendages moved restlessly around the chamber. Through their mental connection, Hayoung could feel the creature's ancient fear mixing with its determination to fight. Doctor, we need you in the lab immediately. Chief Engineer Bora's voice came through the communication system. Kethmer is doing something we have never seen before. Hayoung rushed to the containment level. When she arrived, she found Biora and her team monitoring readings that made no sense, according to human science. It started about an hour ago, Biora explained. Kethmer's energy output has increased by 300%. But more than that, its body structure is changing. Through the observation window, Hayoung could see the transformation. Kethmer's organic and metallic parts were rearranging themselves into new configurations. What had once looked like a mixture of flesh and machine now resembled something designed for war. Sharp edges emerged from its limbs. Its torso expanded and hardened into armor-like plates. Most disturbing of all, its head region had developed what looked like multiple sensory organs that could track movement in all directions at once. Hayoung entered the containment chamber despite the protests from the security team. Immediately moved toward her, but its approach was different now, more protective, more ready for battle. When they made contact, the visions that flooded her mind were intense and urgent. She saw the silence's attack patterns. She learned how it used infected individuals to spread its influence. And she discovered something that terrified her. The infected colonists are not just victims, she announced to the monitoring team through her communication device. They are scouts. The Silence is using them to study our defenses and find the best way to attack the station. As if responding. To her words, alarms began sounding throughout Kepler 7. Director Yansu's voice echoed through the halls. All personnel to emergency stations. We have multiple contacts approaching the station. Unknown vessels of alien design. Through Kethmer's enhanced senses, Hayoung could feel the Silence's main force arriving. It was not a fleet of ships in any traditional sense. Instead, it was a collection of transformed vessels from dozens of different species, all working together under the Silence's control. They are coming, she whispered to Kethmer. Your people's greatest enemy is finally here. Kethmer's response came not in images but in emotions. Determination, protectiveness, and something that felt almost like gratitude. Through their connection, Hayoung understood that the creature had been alone with its burden for so long that having someone who could share the fight meant everything to it. Doctor, you need to see this, Biora called out urgently. Hayoung looked at the external monitors and felt her blood turn cold. The approaching vessels were obviously not built by a single species. Some were sleek and elegant. Others were purely functional. A few looked like they had been grown rather than constructed, but they all moved with the same eerie coordination. Many? She asked. 47 ships, replied Commander Tehan over the communication system. And they are all broadcasting the same signal. It is some kind of neural frequency that is affecting our crew members. Already some of the station personnel were beginning to act strangely. They moved more slowly and spoke less frequently. A few had stopped what they were doing and simply stood still, staring at nothing. The signal is how the Silence spreads initially, Hayoung explained. It weakens people's individual thoughts and makes them easier to fully convert later. Through the station's intercom system, Director Yansu made an announcement. All personnel with neural implants or cybernetic enhancements report to medical immediately. Anyone experiencing unusual thoughts or loss of motivation should seek help right away. But Hayoung knew it was already too late for some of them. The Silence worked quickly once it found a foothold in the containment chamber. Kethmer had completed its transformation. The creature now looked like a living weapon designed specifically for this battle, but it remained gentle when interacting. With Hayoung careful not to harm her with its newly developed defenses, show me how to fight them, she said to Kethmer through their mental link. The creature shared its knowledge of combat, techniques its people had developed over thousands of years of warfare, but the information came with a warning. Silence adapted to every strategy eventually. The only way to truly defeat it was through methods it could not predict or understand. Human unpredictability, Hayoung murmured. That is our advantage. Outside, the station, the alien vessels, had stopped their approach and were hovering just beyond weapons range. They were not attacking immediately. Instead, they were broadcasting their neural signal more strongly, trying to convert more of the station's crew. Before beginning their assault, Dr. Minho's voice came through the communication system with panic barely controlled. Dr. Hayoung, we need you in the medical bay. We have crew members who are no longer responding to any stimuli. They are just standing there like the colonists. Hayoung felt Kethmer's protective instincts surge through their connection. The creature moved toward the containment chamber's exit, clearly intending to break free and defend the station. Not yet, she told it. If you reveal yourself too early, the Silence will adapt its strategy. We need to wait for the right moment. But even as she said the words, Hayoung could feel time running out. The Silence's influence was spreading through the station like a slow poison. Soon there would be more infected crew, more members than healthy ones. And then the real attack would begin. Through the observation windows, she could see the alien vessels beginning to move again. They were forming an attack pattern that looked hauntingly familiar from Kethmer's memories. It was the same formation the Silence had used to destroy Kethmer's homeworld 500 years ago. This is it, she said to Kethmer. The battle your people never got to finish. Are you ready? The creature's response came as a surge of fierce determination mixed with protective love. It had spent 5 centuries preparing for this moment, and now it would not fight alone. It had found someone who could stand beside it, against the darkness. someone it would protect with everything it had left. The attack came at dawn. Station time. The Silence's vessels opened fire with weapons that did not destroy, but instead drained the life force from everything they touched. Kepler-7's shields flickered and died as the alien energy washed over. Dr. Hayoung felt each hit through her connection with Kethmer. The creature's protective instincts were overwhelming now, focused entirely on keeping her safe from the approaching threat, but they both knew that hiding would not save anyone. Director Yansu Hayoung called through the communication system. "You have to let Kethmer out of containment. It is our only chance to fight back." "Absolutely not," came the reply. "Thing is too dangerous to release during a battle." But even as the director spoke, infected crew members were moving through the station's corridors. They walked with the same empty expressions as the colonists, but now they carried tools and weapons. The Silence was using them to sabotage the station's defenses from within. Chief Engineer Bora watched her monitoring screens with growing horror. "Doctor, the infected crew members are accessing critical systems. They are shutting down our life support and weapon systems." Through her mental link with Kethmer, Hayoung could see the battle from the creature's perspective. The Silence was using the same tactics it had employed against every other world it had conquered. First weaken the defenders from within, then overwhelm them with superior numbers. "This is exactly what happened to my people." She felt Kethmer communicate to her. The same pattern, the same inevitable defeat. But Hayoung sensed something else in the creature's ancient memories, a possibility that Kethmer's people had never been able to try. A desperate strategy that required perfect trust between two different forms of consciousness. "The neural bond," she whispered. "Your people could never do it because they were all the same species. But you and I are different. We might be able to create something the Silence cannot understand or control." The idea terrified and thrilled her at the same time. A permanent, mental fusion with an alien consciousness would change her forever. She would still be human, but she would also be something more. Something that had never existed before. "Doctor, whatever you are thinking, do not do it," Dr. Minho's voice came through the intercom. "We can find another way to fight these things." But there was no time for another way. The station shook as more alien weapons struck its hull. Emergency lights flickered throughout the corridors. And in the medical bay, Dr. Suman was documenting the final stages of infection in the crew members who had been exposed to the Silences. "Signal. They retain all their memories and skills," she reported over the communication system. "But they show no emotional responses and no individual preferences. It is like watching someone become a perfectly efficient machine." Hayoung made her decision. She placed both hands against Kethmer's main body and opened her mind completely to the creature's consciousness. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever experienced. At first, there was chaos. It's completely different forms of thought, trying to occupy the same mental space. Human emotions crashed against alien logic. Individual desires mixed with collective memories spanning thousands of years. But gradually, something beautiful began to emerge from the confusion. Hayoung's creativity and adaptability merged with Kethmer's ancient knowledge and tactical experience. Her human unpredictability combined with the creature's patient wisdom. Dr. Suman watched through the observation window as the fusion took place, knowing that every stage of the process, knowing that what she was witnessing might be the birth of an entirely new form of consciousness. "The energy readings are off the scale," reported Biora from her monitoring station. "Whatever is happening in there is generating power levels we did not know were possible." The bonding process reached its climax as Hayoung felt her individual identity expanding rather than disappearing. She was still herself, but now she was also connected to something vast and ancient. Kethmer's memories became her memories. Its knowledge became her knowledge, and its desperate love for all living. Things became part of her heart. When the fusion was complete, Hayoung opened her eyes and saw the world through senses that no human had ever possessed. She could feel the life force of every person on the station. She could sense the empty spaces where the Silence had drained away individual consciousness. And she could perceive the alien vessels outside as clearly as if she were standing next to them. "Sumen," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that had not been there before.
Document everything. If we survive this, humanity needs to understand.
What just happened here? The containment chamber's barriers meant nothing now. Hyung and Kethmer moved through them as if they were made of light. The creature's body had become her body. Strength had become her strength. Together, they flowed through the station's corridors toward the docking bay. Infected crew. Members tried to stop them, but the merged consciousness simply bypassed their attacks with movements too fluid and unpredictable for the silence to counter. In the command center, Director Yansu watched security cameras track their progress. What is that thing? It is not the same creature we captured. It is Dr. Hae-young, replied Commander Tae-hun, with awe in his voice. She is merged with the alien. They have become something new. The merged consciousness reached the docking bay and did something that amazed everyone watching. Kethmer's body began to change again, but this time it was expanding, growing, transforming into something that looked like a living spacecraft. Hae-young's human consciousness guided the transformation, adding features that pure alien logic would never have considered. The result was a vessel that combined the best of both species, technology and creativity. My God, whispered Captain Jinwoo over the communication system from his position aboard the Guardian. It is beautiful. The living ship that had once been Hae-young and Kethmer launched from the station and moved toward the Silence's fleet. But instead of attacking immediately, it began to sing. The song was unlike anything that had ever existed in the galaxy. It combined human music with alien harmonics, creating something that touched the deepest parts of consciousness itself. The song spoke of love and loss, of sacrifice and hope, of the fierce determination to protect life in all its forms. The Silence's vessels stopped their attack. For the first time in galactic history, the ancient enemy hesitated. It did not understand what it was hearing. The song contained emotions and concepts that its collective consciousness could not process or control, and in that moment of confusion, Hae-young struck back, not with weapons or force, but with something far more powerful. She broadcast her merged consciousness across the entire system, showing every infected person what it meant to be truly individual. She reminded them of their own dreams and fears and loves, one by one. The infected crew members began to remember who they were. The real battle was just beginning. The song that Hae-young and Kethmer created together spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. It carried with it something the Silence had never encountered in millions of years of conquest. The pure essence of individual will combined with protective love on Kepler 7 station. The infected crew members began to shake their heads as if waking from a long dream. Dr. Minho was the first to fully recover, his psychological training helping him rebuild his sense of self more quickly than the others. I remember, he said in wonder. I remember who I am. The emptiness is gone, but the battle was far from over. The Silence's fleet regrouped quickly, adapting to this new threat with the cold efficiency that had destroyed countless civilizations. The alien vessels began broadcasting a stronger signal, trying to overwhelm Hae-young's song with pure psychic force. Inside the living ship, Hae-young felt the pressure against her merged consciousness. The Silence was trying to break the bond between her and Kethmer to separate them back into individual beings that could be more easily defeated. Hold on, she whispered to her alien partner. We are stronger together than either of us could be alone. Through their shared awareness, she felt Kethmer's agreement. The creature had waited 500 years for this moment, and it would not let the Silence win again. Their ship moved through space with grace that defied physics. Hae-young's human intuition guided them between enemy attacks, while Kethmer's ancient knowledge showed them exactly where to strike back. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the right of all conscious beings to remain individuals. Director Yunsu, Captain Jinwoo's voice came through the station's communication system. You're detecting something incredible. The merged entity is not just fighting the Silence. It is calling to something else. The captain was right. Hae-young's song was reaching beyond the battle, beyond the solar system, into the deep spaces where other survivors might be hiding, and amazingly, something was answering. Across the galaxy, dormant alien technologies began to activate. On worlds that had been silent for centuries, ancient guardians stirred from their long sleep. Kethmer's people had not been the only species to fight the silence. They had been part of a vast network of protectors, each one waiting for the signal that the final battle had begun. Dr. Suman watched from the station's observation deck as points of light began appearing throughout the star system. Ships and beings from dozens of different species, all awakened by Hyung's call, were arriving to join the fight. "This is impossible," she breathed. "There are hundreds of them. Maybe thousands." The reinforcements were unlike anything inhuman. Records some were mechanical constructs the size of space stations. Others were living creatures that could survive in the vacuum of space. A few appeared to be pure energy beings that existed as patterns of light and consciousness, but they all shared one thing in common. They had been waiting for someone who could unite them. Against the silence, Hyung felt their presence through her expanded awareness. Each species brought its own unique strengths to the battle. Together, they represented millions of years of combined knowledge and experience in fighting the galaxy's greatest threat. "Kethmer," she said through their mental link, "your peoples. Sacrifice was not in vain. They helped create this moment." The final confrontation began as the silence realized what it was facing. For the first time in its existence, the ancient enemy was outnumbered and outmatched. The collective consciousness that had consumed entire civilizations suddenly found itself fighting beings it could not understand or control. Hyung coordinated the battle from a unique position as the bridge between human unpredictability and alien wisdom. She sent some guardians to protect fleeing civilian ships, while others engaged the Silence's main fleet directly. But the real victory came from something simpler. The song that she and Kethmer had created continued to spread, reaching infected populations throughout the galaxy. Everywhere it touched, individuals began to remember themselves. The Silence's vast network of controlled minds started to collapse as people reclaimed their personal identities. "It is working," reported Commander Taehyun from Kepler-7's command center. "We are receiving signals from colonies that went dark weeks ago. They are saying they are free." The battle lasted for 3 days, though time seemed to flow differently. For Hyung, in her merged state, when it finally ended, the silence had been driven back to the dark spaces between dimensions where it had originally come from. The ancient enemy was not destroyed, but it was contained and weakened. More importantly, the galaxy now had guardians who understood how to fight it. In the aftermath, Hyung found herself changed in ways that went beyond her fusion with Kethmer. She could still feel her human identity clearly, but it was now part of something larger. She had become a bridge between species, a translator of thoughts and emotions that had never been shared before. Dr. Hyunwoo, who had arrived on a rescue ship just after the battle ended, interviewed her extensively about the experience. He was one of the few survivors from the original research team, and he understood the importance of documenting what had happened. "Do you regret the fusion?" he asked during one of their sessions. Hyung considered the question carefully. Through her connection with Kethmer, she could feel the creature's contentment. It was no longer alone with its burden. And she was no longer just one individual fighting against forces beyond her understanding. "No," she said finally. "I am still human, but I am also more than human, and that is what we needed to become to survive." The living ship that was their merged form became the flagship of a new alliance. Species from across the galaxy sent representatives to learn from Hyung's unique perspective. Some were ancient guardians like Kethmer. Others were young civilizations just beginning to explore space. All of them shared the goal of protecting individual consciousness from threats like the Silence. Years later, Hyung stood at the edge of known space, watching for signs of the enemy's return. Kethmer's presence was a constant comfort in her mind, no longer alien, but simply another part of herself. Together, they had become something that had never existed before, a perfect fusion of protection and love. Behind them, the galaxy thrived under the protection of the new Guardian Network. Humans worked alongside dozens of other species, sharing knowledge and defending each other from cosmic threats. Dr. Hanwoo's final report. distributed throughout human space, concluded with a simple observation: humanity's greatest strength was never our technology or our weapons. It was our ability to form bonds that transcend the boundaries of species and consciousness itself. Hai Young smiled as she read those words. Through her merged awareness, she could feel Kethmer's agreement. The creature that had once been suspicious of everyone now held her tight in a bond that could never be broken. And together, they would make sure that no other civilization would face the silence. Alone, the horror had found its match in human love, and love had transformed them, both into something greater than either could have been alone.